be the result. Oh, yeah. So, it's not time o'clock. I suspect we can give it like 2 more minutes to get people wandering in. I'll spend 2 more minutes reciting the recitals. So the 2 minutes of mercy have passed. Welcome to MEDIAMAN, the last session on the last day of the last week of the IETF in Brisbane. This is the last presentation of the Note 12 for this week too. I mean, I kind of don't see many new participants here. That if you don't know what the rules are, you should learn. There's lots of links on those pages. By showing up here and opening your mouth, you're bound by them, whether you understand them or not. And when you participate in the IETF, behave. Be nice to each other. Or professional disagreement is perfectly acceptable. Unprofessional disagreement is not. And we have ombudspersons who will listen carefully to what you say if you believe that someone else has violated these procedures. Meeting tips, make sure you sign in so that we can get an appropriately sized room for next time. Well, the broom closet. A little more than it. Remote participants, turn on your audio and video when you have gotten your place in the queue or are given mic as presenters. Otherwise, keep them off. Use of a headset is strongly recommended. Resources. Okay. Now in the real business. I must admit that the agenda here is actually more correct than the agenda I posted to the page. I haven't updated the agenda on the meetings page yet. Document status for top level, multiple suffixes, which is a kind of the long discussion, organizations in a standards tree, the RTP media type registry merge, and the whole concept of rewrite. But we now have a moment of silence until someone volunteers to take notes. Alexei has promised to do his best. Remember to note that in the notes.
Yes.
Yes.
Hey.
That's what I call perfect timing.
Good timing. Good timing. If I have your laptop ready, it's excellent. It's a party here. Are we majority of your laptops?
So I believe we have 4 documents that are actually documents, unless I've forgotten one. There's top level, which has a new version published on March 3rd this year. And when Lars Eggert got to see that version, he dropped this discuss before leaving the ISG. So there are no more discusses on documents. There's haptics, which has been approved, but is waiting for top level. Suffixes, we'll get to that. Standards tree, I forgot to send out the message saying, this is now, I think this has been adopted by the working group. So I'll do that after this meeting. Sorry, Mark. And of course, so we have the question of actually rewriting the registration document. And I had a volunteer actually managed to locate the XML file of the last ID version and make one patch to it. I forget who it was, so I have to look it up. But we have started a little bit, but he has not promised to be editor of the total rewrite of the document, incorporating all the things that we have done, which I think we need to do. Top level had 3 open issues before the last version, and 05 tried to address them, and Lars Eggert thinks that this is not good enough to go forward. The AD is saying that he's awaiting working group feedback. So I would say, who has read the 05 version of the draft? Yes. Yeah. And I would like to say that sometime like 2 weeks from now, given that Easter comes in, I will send a message to the AD saying that this document is good enough unless someone has read it and claims that it isn't. So please, 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 please read it. Because once it's an RFC, it's there forever. Well, the ID is there forever too, but that's another matter. What?
We shouldn't miss the work of publication.
Yeah.
You have to ask people to do it.
Can you ping them on the chat? Yeah. I mean, I'm locked out of that computer according to the sticker, so I can't press yes or no. Okay, so we have a reading problem. So suffixes. I put in a couple of slides on the fact that I'm still unclear about what suffixes mean, or whether they mean anything at all. They kind of sound like they introduce an alternate representation of, or an alternate interpretation of the content. Like if it ends in plus XML, you can display it in the debugger. We could also say that it's a conceptual processing step to get at the inner semantics of it. I'm not sure how to express this correctly. So I have another presentation that is slightly more optimistic than mine. So I'll switch to that. Let me see. Suffixes. Is Manu actually here? I don't see him.
We're at the plane, you should be able to tap the cancel option.
No, it does not react.
Oh, is that one frozen?
Oh, the keyboard is locked. So the computer is fine, but we can't get rid of that stupid window.
That's all right. It's just obscuring the. Oh, tapping directly off the touch screen.
Oh. I didn't think of that. That's interesting. Yeah. Manu, do you want to talk?
Hi, Harold. Apologies. I was having a problem with Meet Echo. Would you like me to take over the slides?
Yeah, I can shift to the slides if you don't want to.
Okay, yeah. There's only this slide. There's not much to do here, right? So the 07 draft was pushed out a couple of weeks ago. It really only changed one thing with the specification, which was the main thing that came up during the last meeting. So that was specifically that structured suffixes containing more than one structured suffix segment would require the registrant to register all structured suffixes in that in that area. So basically, you know, if you had a structured suffix like plus foo, plus bar, plus baz, the person that wanted that media type, including the structured suffix, would have to make sure that plus baz was registered, plus bar, plus baz was registered, and plus foo, plus bar, plus baz was registered. We tried it the other way last time. There were objections, multiple objections to doing it that way. So this is the only other way to address that. We've put that out to the list. It seems like people are okay with holding their nose and proceeding with this approach, and that addressed the last issue in the issue tracker. So that's effectively it. The only other open issue that we have is whether or not we want to do a new RFC with this modification by itself, or if we want to hold off on that and integrate that into an inline update to RFC 6838. But that's more of a general, I think, question around how we're going to wrap all of these things into 6838 if we want to do that. Okay, well, I mean, that's pretty much it. And here's the list of people that have reviewed the specification in its variety of forms. We're out of issues. Do we want to go to last call is the open question.
So before I open the queue, who has read 07? Wow, 4 people.
The difference between those.
Yep. Okay, we have a few people. So that's good. So, Mark.
Mark Nottingham. So when we started this work, I had misgivings about it, about the meanings of suffixes, and especially multiple suffixes, and how they were being used, and expressed those, I think, pretty extensively. And then we decided to do the work anyway. People agreed that there was enough momentum and potential real-world use that was okay. So I pushed those feelings down deep inside, like any good cis white man does of a certain age, and said, okay, this can go ahead and I can stomach that. The recent discussion on the list, and I think what you expressed just earlier, Harold, perhaps before Manu joined, brings those feelings back up. I really think that if we're going to have this capability in the media type architecture, keeping in mind that they're used not just on the web, which is, I think, super important and a big minefield, we need to understand what they mean. And maybe there's more than one answer for what they mean. And I think in the current use that's true. But some guidelines about what is a good suffix, what's a useful suffix, and what is not, and also a way to apply that knowledge to make sure in the registration process that good media suffixes get registered and bad ones do not. Because otherwise, I'm concerned it's going to become, as I think I've referred to it a few times, flare, where people are just signaling something that is indistinct and meaningless, and it trashes out the value of media types as a touch point for interoperability. So I think we need to have that discussion and document the results of it. And I'm sorry if that makes people unhappy, but I think it's better for the internet if we make these things useful, if we're going to do them.
Okay, Martin Durst.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I somewhat agree with Mark, but I would like to express this as the glass being half full rather than half empty, to say so. I think depending on the suffix, you have different situations where it makes sense to interpret that suffix by itself and to act in some way on it. I think the first, or maybe one of the first suffixes that was introduced was plus XML. And the idea there was that generic XML processes, which would be maybe a XML editor or something like that, would just interpret this as XML, and more specific software would act on the whole type together. And so it really, but that's just for XML editors. They can do something with the plus XML. Some other software can do something with some other suffix. And when exactly that makes sense may very much depend on the circumstances. So I think we should probably in the draft give some good examples and explicitly say that it depends on the circumstances. Thank you.
Okay, Martin Thompson.
Yeah, I was less concerned about this having read the document, and then I read the conversation. And the use of, I think it was probably confusion on the part of the person writing it, but they they essentially said, well, we're talking about plus gzip as an option, and they said plus bar plus gzip and then plus gzip plus bar, and it wasn't really clear from my perspective, whether they understood what order things were in at the time, and that was a bit of a concern for me. I get what Martin's saying about being able to throw this, a document at a thing that only has generic processing capabilities. But you can do that in other ways as well. Like you can say this is an XML document, even without the plus XML suffix. So I think from a protocols perspective and use in HTTP, I'm much more comfortable with the notion that the entire semantics of the thing that's being presented is understood rather than some sort of partial processing. And I realize this is a point of philosophical difference. I suspect that Manu will disagree with me on this point because of the whole use of linked data, but I am very much concerned with this possibility that something might only partially understand what is processing, particularly in a protocol context. There may be some cases where that's not really the concern, but we have tools for managing that, such as this particular media type means that you use this generic presentation form in your editor. I would like to draw people's attention to something that Teresa O'Connor wrote about polyglot formats, which sort of plays into this a little bit as well. And there we have some interesting security implications to deal with, which is that if you have multiple processes that look at a document in different ways, the potential for confusion between those different processes, it introduces some very interesting interoperability and security problems. So I will send a link in the chat on that one. Oh, thanks. Yeah. This is a long debate that the TAG is currently having. And I don't think that we've really reached any conclusions there either. So I'm afraid I don't have any real light to shine on this other than that.
So Manu?
Right. So the place this document started was we worked on the JSON LD spec, and we were told by media type registration, the designated experts, that we should do plus LD plus JSON, which we did. And then when we were working on things that use JSON LD, that were kind of more specialized documents, we were told do the base document and then do plus LD plus JSON after it. And then we tried to register it, and the registration was rejected because people said, well, we don't know what that means. So that created this specification, and there was agreement to kind of work on it and take it to, where it's gotten now, which does answer at least the initial questions that were asked. I'm trying, Mark, I'm trying to figure out what the concrete change could be to the specification that would address your concerns. I know we have to have a discussion, but I don't know, what is that discussion going to be around? What specific paragraph or section should we add? The same kind of question to Martin. What concrete things are we looking at, or are we just saying there is a philosophical disagreement here that the group is never going to be able to reconcile?
So Mark, to reply, I think I would feel a lot better if there were a section in the spec that explained in considerable detail the different use cases for multiple suffixes. And part of the problem here also is I think suffixes themselves were introduced without any kind of guidance or framework. They were just put there because people said we want suffixes. And so we really need to consider not just multiple suffixes, but suffixes full stop. What are the use cases for them? What is an appropriate suffix? What is an inappropriate suffix? How are they used? And then multiple, of course, adds a layer of complexity to that, which needs to be addressed as well. And if you can document that, and especially the inappropriate side of it as well, of, look, some people might want to do this, but don't do that. And then that becomes guidance to the experts for the registry, assuming that it is an expert review registry. And maybe that's another topic to discuss, is what's the right level for registering one of these things.
Martin?
That was a race. Only very. I think really what we're talking about here is how comfortable are we with suffixes generally? Because if you look at the document, with the eyes that say, I accept what suffixes provide, this is a pretty logical extension of that. And within that framework, it makes complete sense. And I think it's a well-written document. It's very clear about what it is. It lays out the sort of concerns, but it doesn't address that question that Mark is talking about, is what is it to define a suffix, and why would we define a suffix, and what does it mean to have suffixes on media types? And I think that is fundamentally the key question. The idea that you have a plus gzip thing kind of scares me a little bit, because it means that you could have plus gzip on anything at that point. Any media type could have and then we're like, well, why did we bother doing content codings in different things? So there's some interesting questions to ask there. So let's talk about that question. And I apologize for having this question opened at this point, which is a long way past the point where I think folks like Manu would be happy with it. But yeah, we have to deal with the sort of legacy that we've left ourselves.
Manu again?
Right. So if can both of you help write that section? I can take a shot at it, but I'm concerned about writing it and then kind of this continuing to repeatedly happen, where things keep coming up at the we address the issue, sections are written, we publish something, everything's quiet, and then at the meeting something new comes up, like, please write this extra section. Would you be willing to help write that section?
So Manu, it's Mark again. The way you phrased that puts the onus on us, which I have a little bit of a problem with. I didn't want to include this in the first place. I didn't think it was a good idea, and I tried to express that pretty strongly. I am happy to evaluate what is written about it, but I don't have use cases for doing this. And so whoever has use cases for using suffixes needs to, motivate those. I'm happy to help write. I'm happy to edit. I'm happy to, give feedback, but I don't have use cases. So we need people with use cases to come forward, and then we need to probably classify those and figure out, okay, well, these are the things that as a community we believe are good uses of suffixes. And then I think, what I wanted to get up, and probably can take myself off the queue, is after that, and it's not a blocking thing, but after all that, we need to go back and look at the existing registered suffixes and probably put some language around them to explain what they're for and how they should be used by media types, because like gzip, as Martin points out, can be damaging to use. And so we should, as a community, provide advice to registrants about when it's appropriate to use it and when it's not appropriate to use it. But I'm happy to put work into it, Manu. And certainly we can, maybe a useful step forward would be to look at the existing registered suffixes and say, well, what are people using this for and why? And can we come up with some sort of taxonomy there that explains that and evaluate that and see where we sit then? I think that would be a useful, concrete thing we could do in a relatively limited amount of time. I'm open to other ideas too. But I guess to answer the question you didn't ask, I'm willing to put work into it. I'm just not willing to advocate suffixes because I don't have the use cases.
Yep, understood. Thank you.
So put myself in the queue with a marker. There's another point on suffixes, that suffixes document, that we've pretty much concluded that the current suffixes registry is a mess. And the current document says that the suffixes registry should have a new format with new rules for what the columns are. Now, IANA is very fond of saying, okay, if you want to change registry and its registry contents, they want instructions. And those should probably be in this document, which gives a convenient handle for actually taking a look at the existing suffixes and seeing what they might be good for. So that's a thought. Pete.
This is Pete Resnick. I just had a question. I mean, my understanding is this all started because Manu or someone else had actually a use case that they wanted to register. Do we have some answer for them other than, as Martin put it, bring me a rock for their particular use case now so they can get unstuck and then we can go on to fixing the mess that we've made? Because the suffix problem, the suffix mess is not their mess, as far as I can tell.
Mark, again, I recall we had a discussion at one point that you know, for the ones that are, there's obvious pressure from a couple of media types that, hey, we need to get registered and we have multiple suffixes, so we got to wait for you. And was it Prague? Was it London? I don't know. We were in some amazing city. And we said, you know, well, maybe we can do this as a, let's try this out while the thing is going through the IETF process. I mean, frankly, if this thing has broad deployment, maybe we should just recognize it and grandfather it in, take that pressure off, and then figure out how to sort things out. And after we sort things out, if we decide that, you know, it breaks some rule, well, it's grandfathered in. Just don't do it again. And to me, that's the important part here. It's not to say no to these specific people. It's to have some ecosystem health where we're not encouraging people to do things that are going to break the internet.
Comments from Mani?
Yeah, I mean, so this question for at least the decentralized identifier work has been kind of floating out there for, Brent would know, I don't know, 3-4 years now. Like, we've been waiting on an answer. 5 years. Thank you, Brent. 5 years. So we've been waiting on an answer for 5 years. And in the meantime, people have just shipped stuff with multiple plus signs and things of that nature. For verifiable credentials, it's even way more time sensitive. Like, things are already going out into production and people are already using the multiple plus signs because we thought that was, you know, we thought we'd have closure on it by now. You know, if we don't do this thing, the only option where we could actually get a media type registered is to strip all of the suffix stuff out and just use dashes everywhere and treat everything as opaque. And, you know, I think at that point, at least the community that's looking at this stuff loses interest in pushing forward the suffixes stuff. So I'm trying to, I appreciate the suggestion that we just, you know, do something and then potentially grandfather it in. But at the same time, I mean, we don't really know what implementers are going to do, right? I mean, if we leave the suffixes if we leave the multiple suffixes in there and we say, hey, this is being worked out at IETF, we will register the suffix at some point in the future. People are going to look at that in the spec, and they're just going to start using whatever media type we said we may, you know, register in the future. So in some cases, this is like, we need this addressed pretty imminently because there are deployments going out with nation states using like verifiable credentials and DIDs, and they need media types, and we're going to ship something into production. And on the other side of it, it's kind of like, well, we've been waiting for 5 years already, so what's another 5 years? Right? I mean, people are just going to pick something and ship it, and whatever gets out there gets out there. For the specific use case of DIDs and VCs, I think there is a very clear set of use cases and a very clear way of interpreting it. For cases like Martin brought up, where it's like plus gzip, yeah, that is like shrug. I don't know why'd people do that, right? And now we have to kind of retcon it into 6838. So apologies, I was a little rambling. I'm saying, people are going to start shipping stuff imminently into production, and we need to tell them something. That doesn't mean we need to register it, but it would really be nice to have clarity on what we could eventually, register. That does relieve pressure if we can, give the implementation community some kind of like, this is what your media type's going to be. And then take however many years more that it's going to take to, clean up the suffix mess.
So that seems like something that we could do reasonably quickly. So Brent.
Hi, Brent Zundell. I happen to chair the VC working group at the W3C. First and foremost, I want to say we don't want to break the internet. Number one goal, not break the internet. I guess number one goal, not break the web. We care about the internet too, but I'm wearing my W3C hat. I have to keep the things. I think the main thing, if we could get hopefully from this meeting, is what's the right thing for us to do right now? Because we've been trying to do the right thing, and we've been coming here and interacting and asking what the right thing is, and we've got this draft and we thought it was the right thing, and then it wasn't quite, and so we fixed it, and we've been continuously trying to steer it in a direction that was hated least by the most people, and are not sure at this point what next steps are. And so, like, what should we do?
You successfully whacked the ball back into our court.
So I think the current proposal on the table is register LD plus. Sorry, is it LD plus JSON or
It's
LD plus
VC
XML?
plus LD plus JSON, and there's a few more media types with even more pluses. So there's all sorts of pluses going on.
So one thing you can do.
5 or less than 10.
One thing you can do that might give some clarity is actually to write up the registration for those 10 types, or those 10 suffixes, because that would give the clear use case for and justification for them in a place that we can read and is separate and is needed anyway.
Thank you.
Alexei.
Yeah, I was just trying to ask the question. So what's the problem with grandfathering? I think what Mark is proposing is basically register the 5 which are in use and add a note saying, don't do this again, maybe? Okay. This is what I would like to do, I suppose. But, this is how I understand grandfathering.
So the grandfathering solution, you have those things in the registry that will encourage other people to not ask for permission, but ask for forgiveness too. And if that's going to be the case, I'm a little concerned. How concerned, I'm not sure, especially if other, VC-ish, media types come along, they're like, well, they could use them, why couldn't we? That puts us in a really awkward position. We are mean, Pete. You know that, I know that, but they don't know it yet.
You understand that multiple suffixes are bad on submission.
Sure, I'm about that. Actually, so in the registries I'm managing, I'm starting to write kind of guidelines and like much more explanatory documents to help with that. But anyway, I think, Manu, if I heard you correctly, you said you're kind of at this decision point, where you're not getting, massive deployment yet, but you're on the cusp of it, and you need to know now kind of which way to go. if I think for me, the critical factor is if you can describe what value you get from the multiple suffixes in good detail, concrete use cases of it. Look, it makes the world better in this particular way that we can understand. That really helps. Because if you're able to ship it with the dashes instead of the pluses right now, and your users are still able to meet their use cases, or and it's not just, well, it sure would be nice in this kind of little peripheral way. Ship it with the dashes. Go for it. Go. We don't want to stop you from shipping. But if there's value that's to be had, it'd be good if we understood that to motivate the work. And I know we've talked about that a little bit in the past, but I feel like we're still not grasping the use cases for these things beyond, well, in theory, you can point another piece of software in, and even if it doesn't understand that, it'll still understand that. I think we need more detail than that, because as Martin points out, there be dragons potentially. And I think we need to understand that to do that. But if you're able to ship it with the dashes, ship it with the dashes. Otherwise, yeah, maybe the most pragmatic path forward is ship it with the pluses, and we'll grandfather them in, and have big, bold, flashing, blinking. Oh wait, we don't do blink tags anymore. Things in the registry that says that, hey, you can't get one of those.
Martin.
So I don't think we're quite there yet, but I thought I'd say it at the microphone so that we can cogitate on it a little bit. But if we don't know what a good suffix is and means and does, then maybe it's just a convention for naming things, and the plus doesn't really mean anything. And we can say that and retire the notion of suffixes effectively. People will assign meaning to it, but people assign meaning to conventions outside this context anyway. And we can't stop them from doing that. I mean, if you have named all of your verifiable credentials related media types VC blah blah blah, then that establishes a convention as well. People will infer things about them, and if someone else uses VC blah blah blah, then they might make assumptions that are bad or assumptions that are good. But plus JSON could just be plus XML could just be a relic of the past, and we could say, look, it's a media type. And yeah, well, it's not quite 6648, but I think it's along those lines. just floating that, because that is one potential outcome of the discussions here, which is that we decide that, well, we don't really know what a suffix is or does.
Martin, just.
Yes, I just for a moment would like to play devil's advocate. Mark and Martin Thompson are expressing concerns about the use of these plus suffixes, and I very much want to take these concerns seriously because of, well, I know Mark and Martin Thompson, and I know they have a lot of knowledge, but I'm still a bit unclear what exactly the concerns are. And it might be good if they were, well, maybe I just need a pointer, or they get expressed a bit more concretely. I mean, damaging the internet is definitely not what we want to do, but it would be good to know exactly how or what kind of concerns there are. Thank you.
Martin, it's Mark. I think the link to Tess's website that was put in the chat is probably a great starting point for that if you want a pointer.
Manu?
Yeah, I think we should talk about Tessa's post. I think there are a number of responses to it that it doesn't hold water. A number of the arguments that are made there, I agree that that's a debate that we can have probably on the mailing list. But going back to what Martin said, I mean, the reason we're doing all of this stuff is that we were told to put plus signs in the plus LD plus JSON media type to begin with. We started off going like, why can't we just use dashes? And we were going to have LD dash JSON, and we were told by the designated experts that we should really be using suffixes. So we did that, and that kicked this whole thing off. If we had gone the other way, we wouldn't be having this discussion today. It would have just been dashes all the way through, and probably people would not be reading something into the plus sign. So one thing that we could do is just say, you know what, pluses and dashes are effectively the same thing. As Martin said, it's just some kind of, historic notation that we've seen. They mean effectively the same thing, which is they don't mean anything. So use whatever you want. I know that that's not necessarily what Martin was proposing, I don't think, but it's an option. If we can't agree what suffixes mean, we can say that they don't actually mean anything and they're equivalent. Dashes and pluses are equivalent. I'm seeing Mark shake his head, so maybe we can't do that.
That would effectively be Martin Thompson's suggestion, just to remove the special properties of plus. It's not a character. But we got Hans-Jörg Happel.
Yeah, this is Hans-Jörg. I have some stupid questions, and maybe this I'm seeing it totally wrong, and there's probably a couple of people in the room that followed this quite longer, but yeah, I'm interested to hear about that. So I read about this former structured suffix RC a couple of time ago, and my understanding always was there is in my understanding, there is two high-level use cases for media types in a way. So one is sort of on the desktop, right? I'm not sure this was ever extended, but you have that MIME type versus application mapping, which you have when you open a file or something like that. And in my understanding, these initial plus things for XML and so on were sort of designed with that in mind in a certain way, that I might have a generic XML editor, which can open any XML file, and I might have a dedicated editor for certain subtypes of that. And then there is the second thing of where these media types are used, which is probably a little bit overlapping, but also unrelated, which is somehow on web protocols, like, on HTTP, whatever, in header fields and these kind of things. And in my understanding, this use case, which is proposed here with the VC, somehow is sort of rather in that case, right? I might not have that as a file on my desktop, right? So probably this is, and also I think most of the risks that are anticipated, I understand, are more in that kind of situation, right? That I put something like a gzip in there, but I also have a gzip on the connection itself or something like that. And not so much in that desktop use case. So first of all, I want to know, is that kind of taxonomy, does it feel right for people? And if so, that might probably help sort out things here a little bit, because I think if we talk about why were these things created in the past, they were probably created with this kind of desktop metaphor in the mind. And I don't see really a use case for that, or where this is used actually on the, header level, connection level. But yeah, I'm happy to learn if I see it right or wrong.
We seem to have exhausted the queue. So we have had 3 different options suggested. That one is to carry on the discussion until we agree on what a suffix is and what a good suffix is, and document that. We have not been terribly successful at that so far. That's the problem. The second one is to take Manu's a bunch of media types and say, okay, we'll register those, and then we'll have the discussion after registering them. And the third one is to say, this working group has concluded that plus is not a special character.
Oh, this moved. Hold Oh, I see. That side of the room. Mark Nottingham again. I think Pete's asked a question which I was trying to get at, maybe as less effectively in the chat, which is the really important one, which is if we just said upon reflection we're super sorry that you got that guidance before that you should just go and use all those pluses, which in retrospect was clearly not correct. Would that be an outcome? Would that be workable for would you go and register that media type with the dashes in it? And that's what I was trying to get at, is if that's an outcome here, that would be really helpful to know, that if we could move on and take the pressure out of this situation, so we can step back and say, oh, philosophically, what are suffixes? Why are they here? Do you love me? Yes.
I was trying to get the multi-answer poll, and
I
that
really
didn't
just
work.
wanted to see, do you love me in the transcript?
That's right. Yes, no.
Sorry about messing up the tool. Manu.
Right. I mean, yes, we do love you, Mark. And the challenge here is that we would have to go back and change JSON LD. JSON LD has already shipped. It's got plus signs everywhere. Like that stuff shipped like 6 years ago. So now we need an active JSON LD working group to redo the suffixes or the media type for that. We need agreement from that group that that's the right way to go forward, and then we need to involve the DID working group and the VC working group, and you see how this becomes like a difficult thing to get done. We could use dashes, but the only reason we're using dashes is because it's been so difficult to get the suffixes discussion to a conclusion. I do think that there's benefit to them that we could document, but anyway, all that to say is that it does not feel like there's an easy answer here. I think if we were pushed, we would just go with the plus signs for now, and people would ship a bunch of software, and then we can come back and calmly have the discussion around the 3 options that were discussed today, and then maybe many more. Hope that helps.
So if I can modify a little bit, then what if we said, okay, let's register those, and as we discussed, grandfather those, but at least until we figure this out, no more. Like either use dashes or pause. Would that be workable?
Yeah, because at that point, then we can probably, the JSON LD working group's going to spin up again in a couple of months. We could re-raise the question with them. They could decide to drop the plus signs, and then that could potentially ripple through all the other working groups, which would take years, but that's an option.
Right. And I didn't specify exactly what those meant in that sentence. So I was thinking, register the JSON LD ones because they're clearly in they're out there and specified and everything. Although having a W3C spec register, not register media types before it goes to recommendation makes me want to go talk to some people rather urgently. But for the DID stuff, it sounds like that would mean change back to dashes. Is that correct?
It would. Well, I mean, we're talking change back to dashes for the DID group, for the VC group, and for the JSON LD group. All 3 groups would have to update all their media types to remove pluses.
And is that going to fly?
In time? Well, I mean, who knows, right? I mean, there are 100 and some odd people in those working groups.
What I'm asking is, you said that the JSON LD specs had all shipped, and presumably people are shipping software on those, right?
Yes, that's right. It's already out there.
So that has momentum. And so I think in the room here, if I can characterize, it's like we're kind of starting to assume, well, because it's already out there, not only in the specs, but also in implementations, it's probably not going to change anytime soon. Maybe as part of the spec evolution of that ecosystem, it might change. But we should probably just go ahead and grandfather register those no matter what. But for the DID stuff, and for the, what was the other one? The
verifiable credentials.
VC stuff, that's still in flight, right?
Yes.
So,
But in candidate rec, going to proposed rec, like it's towards the end, people are already implementing and shipping.
sure, but they're at that part of implementing and shipping, which is not broad deployment quite yet, as I understand it.
Yes.
They're on the cusp of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and this is when you talk about things at the internet scale, people say, oh yeah, we're already shipping and deploying, but not at the scale that we consider, wow, that's out there. And so if it's really a qualitative thing, if we catch it before then, you can go in and make changes like this at the last minute and it still sticks, but it's a judgment call. And I think that's what we're trying to get a handle on here is where are you in that?
Yep. Tens of millions
Yeah.
of people using it, which is, small numbers in
Sorry?
internet terms.
In the VC and DID cases?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. The
So-
media type. They're using the media type, not just the technology.
So one of the,
No, using the technology, the media type's unknown right now. So it may be a lot, it may not be that many. We don't have good numbers on that.
Oh, the media type's unknown. Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we need from Manu is the list of which particular types he wants grandfathered. We can't grandfather something without a list.
Just if I can finish up real quick. The other factor in that, I think, is an understanding of how many more are coming down the pike. Because if there are a lot and they're going to want equity with the first ones, that's going to be super awkward. And that argues for more for a change now rather than later.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. If we can stop or not. Yep.
Yeah, this is Pete Resnick. I'm pretty convinced that the LD stuff is
Gone.
water over the bridge and milk that we have to lie in and all that stuff. And I think, Manu, you're being asked to make a judgment of if we came back and said, but that's it, no more, use dashes, damn it, that's all we're going to live with, how much kicking and screaming are you going to get? And I understand what I'm asking. It would be good to get feedback sort of in levels of, yeah, that's going to stink, but we think we can do that. All the way to that's useless, it's just going to happen anyway. And we want to get an idea of what we're going to be stuck with. Either way, this is our problem, not yours. But we want to get a feel for, are we going to have to grandfather VC and DID anyway? And we'd prefer not to, but if we have to, we're going to have that conversation one way or the other.
So Brent.
Yeah, Brent Zundell. I just wanted to give folks in the room and listening just an idea of at the W3C what's happening where and the life, like these groups. Like the LD working group is probably spinning up in the next couple of months. When a working group isn't spun up, it's not really active. Nothing's really happening. There's nobody to make decisions, and the group only exists for a couple of years and then it's gone again. The DID working group has been asleep for a while. It might spin up sometime within the next year to maintain the DID spec, but won't really have a body of people there to make decisions about normative changes in the next couple of years. The VC working group is finishing up its charter, so we're hoping to be done. We're hoping to be done by mid-year. We'll probably be done by the end of the year. And then the VC working group will go into more of a hiatus maintenance mode. And so the time to act on advice and decisions in the VC working group is now. The time for LD is possibly in a few months. And the time for DIDS is who even knows, because that charter has been under discussion for a year and a half and it's not even done yet. So just if that's helpful information, hopefully that helps.
So I think I got a poll question that actually made sense to answer. So I'll give that a few more moments for the people who haven't touched it yet. No opinion is very much in the lead.
I don't think we have enough information
No.
in this body.
No?
Well, for LD,
We have a suspicion.
But then the question is not quite correct. Is it LD suffix or LD and other suffixes discussed?
Yeah.
With all respect to the folks in the room representing the LD folks, I'd also probably want to fight for this. Sorry.
Thought we could be casual. It's the end of the week. With all respect to the folks representing those communities in the week, in the room, I think we probably should also work maybe through the liaison and ask the W3C what their take is on this and feed that into the decision as well.
So I think no opinion might be considered as not enough information. Yeah. And that's where that's clearly the
So if I could propose something. I think what we can do is we can propose we are ripping plus signs out of everything, out of JSON LD, out of the VC stuff, out of the DID stuff, and we will just make that concrete suggestion across the board and see how much kicking and screaming that's going to create. Because people will have strong opinions if we do that, and that will tell us how badly people want these structured suffixes. I think the only potential danger here is with the already deployed JSON LD stuff. There's a ton of that embedded in, like 44% the search crawlers are saying 44% of all websites have that media type in them. And as long as we can basically say, well, the JSON LD media type is plus LD plus JSON and also dash LD dash JSON, and processors can understand that, then we can probably retroactively make this change. Does that? I mean, I'm trying to force a decision among multiple working groups to get them to react strongly to see if we can do the simple thing and just use dashes everywhere.
So Manu, it's Mark. I think that's a great way to gather data if you do it properly. And thank you for suggesting it, because that gives us much more concrete data. But there needs to be a serious transition plan associated with that. An intent not to break things. So say, well, for this period of time you use both or whatever. It would be interesting to see the reactions to that, certainly.
So what kind of timeline would you get data from that discussion?
Within a month, probably, if we hit all the working groups with that.
Okay, so May 1st. Let's aim to have a discussion on May 1st.
So Mark raised the question about liaison. I'm happy to facilitate, but I think, unfortunately, yes. I'm very happy to facilitate, but I think in the interest of efficiency and not having intermediaries in the conversation, it would be best if I introduced someone like Harold to the right people on the other end of the system and got them to talk directly. Then we have less of the game of telephone involved. But I can certainly help do that.
Oh shit! I seem to have been volunteered. Okay, we can do that. Okay, we have a action plan, more or less. But Alex,
can I just have a quick?
Queue. I am going to close the queue on this.
Yeah, I suggest we don't define -LD plus JSON as a synonym, because this will just cause people will start mapping and just say plus LD plus JSON is okay, just this once, and don't. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. Manu, you have the last word.
Yeah, I don't know if we can do that, Alexei, but I'll put that on the mailing list. Like, when we start mixing these things, we get in trouble, right? People start asking questions. The main thing I wanted to raise here is that if we go this route, is there any worth in finishing the suffixes documentation? I think at this point we're basically telling anyone in the future, just stop using suffixes, and maybe this document becomes stop using suffixes. Yeah, they exist, already, but
yeah, I have
stop
a short comment from Mark.
I mentioned it before. I think there are two issues here. One is the multiple suffixes, which is what we've concentrated on. And then there's what the hell are suffixes for? And I think, if they're still out there, we need to address that at some point.
Okay. So we have a few other things in my list of worries. The organization's document and the ID has expired. I think we should just reissue it as a working group document. Yeah. So, and then we should issue a working group last call for it after this meeting. I would suggest that this isn't really urgent to get published, so we might want to merge that in a rewrite. And while we're at it, so just to give it as instructions to the type reviewer. Mark?
So I think last time in some city we talked about while it was on hold, using that to get some operational experience with the mechanism. Is that what you're talking about there?
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. So we have a plan. And another little piece of ancient history was the RTP media types registry, which nobody has managed to find out who made the decision to create it. And and every MAN type in that registry is also in the media types registry. So Magnus Westerlund has suggested to just update the registry with a column saying this media type is suitable for RTP, yes or no, and delete the other one. Mark?
Is there an RFC that refers to the registry?
Yes. There are RFCs that register stuff in that registry.
So you just need to leave a tombstone there that says, no, go over there now.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you look at the registry on IANA, it claims it was created by 4855, but 4855 does not mention it. Yes. There is a later document that reminds people to put things in this registry.
Yep. So this registry seems to be singularly unloved. It's just a matter of getting rid of it in the proper fashion. So rewriting the whole document, registration document, is probably a good thing. We have an XML. I have an XML file somewhere in my mailbox that fixes one of the issues, my contribution. So my suggestion would be that we create a repository for it and say that this is the place where you hack away. But we do really need an editor. And the charter says that we should consider rewriting it. It doesn't say we should rewrite it. So we might want to talk to the AD about it. Hey, AD, wake up. Oh, yeah. So, comments about that plan? Yep. So create a repository, put the XML file that we found into it with a fix, and call for an editor. I don't see anyone raising their hands just now. So we'll have to take that to the list.
I'm happy to work into it, but
not be the main editor. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Okay. So we now have any other business? We have 21 minutes left. You can either find some new business to discuss or take 21 minutes off. What do people want to do? I hereby give you 21 minutes. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Harold.
Oh. Well, it was like sometimes we had like
I mean, but our browser is actually using the suffixes to print. I mean, if you're using, I mean, if they're browser, please use this pretty printer. I thought, I think browsers, somebody said on the chat that plus JSON was used by browser.
They seem to, you also then said something like, it doesn't actually make a big difference.
Yeah, I mean.